In Jesus. There's power in the name of
large Christian communities that have a sincere devotion to God. We know Ukraine have a tremendous Christian community, but yet they are undergoing the greatest threat to their liberties in the last 30 years. Praying people, churches that have been established, once they was delivered or separated from the Soviet Empire, now they have planted churches and ministries are flourishing. All of a sudden this assault come on, but still God made promises to them. Amen. God made promises to them, and we have to believe that He is a God that made promises regardless of our circumstances, regardless of our situations and the conditions that we're going through. Even when you are facing threats to your family, to your relationship, God still made promises to you. Your job, that there may be some kind of question about the stability of your job and your financial or economic future, but God still made promises to you. You may be concerned about your health, and the news that you get from your doctor may not be something that will give you means to rejoice, but God yet made promises to you. Amen. Your children may have just turned away from your values and right living, and they may have now strayed in the world and following a different course and a different lifestyle. They may be actually living in a criminal element and lifestyle, but yet God made promises to you. Yes, He did. So God made promises despite the opposition that we are facing and the threats that are confronting us. God yet made promises to us. So don't look at your situation and think that God has forgotten about you. Don't analyze the dilemmas that stand in your way, the mountain of problems that may have not only knocked on your door, but have moved into your house. God yet has made promises, and He keeps His promises. Today we're going to look at the promises of God rewards faith. And it is important that we understand this because otherwise we'll believe that once God makes a promise, it's instant, it's automatic, and we can just sit back and just reap the benefits of it. But no, He rewards faith, the promise of God. In Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6. It reads like this: but without faith, it is impossible to please God. For he that cometh to God must believe that He is, and that He is a rewarder of them that diligently seek Him. So the focus here is pleasing God. He puts the condition there. This is the requirement, the prerequisite to receiving the rewards from God. The prerequisite is to have faith. Amen. He said it's impossible. Not that it is questionable, not that it is suspect, or that it is negotiable. Amen. He said no, it's impossible. That without that element, without faith being a part of your approach to God, it's impossible to please Him. So there are people that say they're praying to God, yet they have no faith in God. He said, you're not pleasing me. You can say all the words that you want. It's not pleasing me because there's no faith attached to it. You're not coming in faith. You're not coming believing. You're not coming expecting. You're not coming looking for me. There are many things that we do that we say is in the name of God, in the name of Jesus, in the name of the Lord. However, there is no faith attached to it at all. And therefore, it does not please God. Our actions, our behavior, there has to be this ingredient that's incorporated into the process that we use, so we are making our appeal unto God. There is something about baking a cake. My first wife, she was interesting. She was a great cook. But one of the things that she had was she also wanted to bake. I come from a family of cake bakers. Almost everybody in my family was able to make cakes from scratch. I'm not talking about Duncan Hines. I'm not talking about Sara Lee. I'm not talking about Intamins. I am talking about real cakes where you take the butter and the sour cream and the sugar and the vanilla and the flour and you mix it all together with other ingredients so that, and you put it in the oven and you wait and so that's the way they did it. And so what she did, my children's mother, she wanted to impress me by baking a cake. And so when we were dating, I went over to her house. We were with her mother and her brothers and whatever. And there was a cake sitting there on the table. And I sat on one side of the table. The cake is on the table. And her brother, she had 3 brothers. And they were, big, strapping guys. They were teenagers, in their upper teens. And they sitting there watching me as the cake is sitting there. And so she cuts a slice of cake for me. And I take a bite of the cake. And while her back is turned, she leaves the room for a minute. Her brothers are watching me. I rush to the garbage can and I spit out the cake. And they just bust out laughing. So she comes back into the room and she sees that my plate is empty. She said, "You want another slice?" I said, No, baby, no. I said, no, I love you. But she had wanted to impress me because of my family's tradition of making cakes. And there's always a cake around the house that my mother or one of my sisters or my aunts had made. And so she wanted to demonstrate her ability to bake a cake. Yes. I married her anyway. But what I found out later on when she got the recipes from my aunt. She said, "Listen, I want to make a cake for me, not to be married." Got the recipes, and it just never turned out right. And she kept wondering why her cakes didn't come out right. And what was the problem was, when she was cooking, whatever she cooked, whether it was red rice, whether it was some kind of other meat or stew or other thing, she was able to somehow adjust the ingredients so that she could make it her own. So she was able to add some things or take out some other things to make that dish unique for her. And so what she did, she tried to take the instructions and the ingredients that my aunt had gave her for making a cake, and she wanted to alter the ingredients. She wanted to change the manner in which they had put together, and she wanted to bake it. You cannot do the same thing when you're baking as you can when you're cooking. There has to be, if you want to have a certain outcome, certain ingredients have to be there in that cake. The same thing when we are approaching God in prayer. approaching God, making our petitions and soliciting Him for help and support, seeking to have the promises of God being realized and poured out into our life. Faith is essential.
Amen.
So we have to understand, there's three aspects we have to understand when it comes to this. First of all, people of faith please God.
Amen.
That when we read this scripture, it's impossible. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. All of a sudden now, we want to become people of faith because we want to please God. So people of faith please God. Then people of faith focuses on God. And then people of faith pursue God. These are the three dynamics and qualities of people of faith. And you will be able to identify whether you are a person of faith or not. It's possible to live in a state of delusion where you believe in something that is totally not reality. There's a song that I like. I love this song, and I've loved it for years, for decades, from the late 1960s, early 1970s, by the Temptations. The song is "It Was Just My Imagination." And I sang that song for decades. Just my imagination. Every time I would hear it, I would just get into the flow of it. Just my imagination. And it's just a song about a man that sees this woman and he have this idea of a relationship with her. She makes such an impression upon him that he have this expectation and this idea that they are involved and engaged in an intimate, loving, dynamic relationship. But when he comes to the chorus, it was just my imagination running away with me. And there are people that believe and think that they are people of faith, but it's just their imagination running away with them. Heaven's out there, I'm a person of faith. I believe God. I trust God. I put my confidence in God. I know God is going to do this. The word says, name it and claim it. I could just do this. And it's just your imagination running away with you. Here's how you could tell when something is real and when it's not. First of all, people of faith please God. And this is why. Our faith acknowledges the importance of our relationship with God. In Mark chapter 8, verse 34 through 37. And I'm here so that you don't live in a state of delusion. You're not in a state of denial. I want us to have a firm understanding what real faith is. Not imitation faith, not wishy-washy faith, not unsubstantiated faith, or real faith. Whenever if you are in a relationship, you're going to really know the status of that relationship. Particularly, it's a relationship where your trust is required. Your ability to put your life in the hands of someone else. You are opening and exposing your deep feelings and emotions. You're making yourself vulnerable to someone. You want to make sure that there is substance in that relationship. Mark chapter 8, verse 34 through 37, it says, "And when he had called unto him with his disciples also, he said unto them, Whosoever will come after me, let him deny himself, and take up his cross and follow me. For whosoever shall save his life shall lose it. But whosoever shall lose his life for my sake and the gospel's, the same shall save it. For what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul?" Are you really a person of faith? Jesus here lays out the standard, the requirement for being in a relationship with him. He said, first of all, you got to deny yourself. Then you got to take up your cross and follow him. And I must say that everybody's not willing to do that. It's just their imagination running away with them. As I mentioned earlier about the people of Ukraine, they are showing and demonstrating that they want freedom. That they do not want to be under the oppressive regime of the Russians. And so they put their faith in actions facing tanks and bombs and missiles and jets, all kinds of things, bombarding and destroying, laying bare their cities, because it's not imagination. It's real. And you will find out if your faith is real if you are willing to deny yourself, pick up your cross, and follow Jesus. Amen. People of faith do that. Faith is the gauge that measures our relationship with God. Yes, it can be measured. It is possible for there to be a way to identify the level of faith you have in God. Because it's a gauge. It reveals. Driving down the street every now and then, I have to take a look at my gas tank to measure that there is gas in the car to get me to my destination. Faith is that gauge. And so when we are unwilling to deny ourselves, no, I gotta have things my way. Things must work out the way I planned. I cannot be inconvenienced by things going awry. When you have faith, it's God's plan. Amen. When you have faith, you trust in God to work and guide and direct your situation. You're not quick to jump out of a situation when you realize that God has made the promise. See, here's one of the things, that sometimes the promises that God has made for us, there is a requirement for us to maybe set aside ourselves and to put Jesus' plans and purpose in priority. And when that don't seem to be looking good and don't look favorable to us, your faith will expose itself. Whether you believe God or not, whether you have a real commitment and relationship with him or not. So faith is the gauge that measures our relation with God. Faith is the bond that binds us in relation with God. And it's important for us to understand that, because if we want to please God, there can be nothing that separates us We can't allow things that the enemy do and what people do to be the cause of us, just turn our back on God. It's just amazing how people will turn their back on God and say, listen, I don't want no part of God anymore because somebody done hurt my feelings. They didn't treat me right. And instead of identifying the problem is with a person, just because someone said that they are a saint and they're a believer in God, and they mistreat you, abuse you, that doesn't justify you saying, God, I blame you for how they're treating me. No. I love God. Yeah. In your family, when you're married, sometimes the person you marry, you have to be very careful because your family may not like you. Now, your spouse may like you, but your family may not like you. And so you have to be careful that you don't turn against your spouse because their family don't like you. And people have done that, getting upset with their spouse because the family don't like them. And that's what we do. Get upset with God because people who say that they belong to God don't like us. Or they're hypocrites. No, your faith shall cause you to hold tighter to God. When you are under the assault of others, your relationship is strengthened because of the bond of faith. Then faith is the fuel that gives life in our relationship with God. Faith is the fuel. If you have no faith, that's why your spiritual life is dead. That's why you are bored. That's why people find themselves distracted, because that faith that should be there that connects us with God, it does not exist. It's just our imagination running away with God. Oh, I got faith in God. I got faith in my relationship with God, but as soon as something happened, oh, God done did this to me. God, and we blame God. Faith is the fuel that gives life to our relationship with God. And I'm going to tell you, it makes you feel the joy. It fills you with peace. It fills you with the love and the blessing of God. Because when you are under attack and the enemy, he wants to nullify, he wants to extinguish our faith. And so therefore, because he realized that he could cause us to deny God, to deny our commitment with God, or believe in false, illusionary, empty faith. He knows he has us. Can't please God. You can't please God. I don't care how many people in this world you please, but if you have no faith, you can't please God. Our faith. Our faith is faith that trusts God's plan for our life. Our faith trusts God's plans for our life. Yes. I'm a person that I like control. Why are you laughing? I like to be in control. I'm not the only one. All of us. Yeah. All of us want control. I mean, understand, we want control. We get in the car, me and my wife, we get in the car. She got her station that she wanted to listen to. I got my station I want to listen to. And so we resolve, whoever driving, that's the station that we listen to. What control? Yeah. But faith trusts God's plan for our life. It means that you're willing to release control in your life. So if you have to schedule and strategize every detail of your life, and if anything is contrary to your plan and purpose, you scrap it. Even even though God may be the one that's trying to get you to change. In Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11, it says this. Jeremiah 29, verse 11, it says this. And I will be reading from the God's Word translation of the Bible. He says, I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord. They are plans for peace and not despair or disaster. Plans to give you a future filled with hope. So that's God's plan for your life. His plan for your life. Now, the reason why he gives this statement is because the people he's talking to are in a situation that it looks like things are not going to look good for them. They've been invaded by another nation. They've been taken captive into a foreign land. They've lost their property. They've lost their liberty. They lost their freedom. But God said, I know my plans I have for you. And then some of us, we have lost control of our life. We lost the ability to make decisions that could determine the course of actions that we want to take. We lost those things, maybe because we lost our job and therefore our financial resources are limited. Maybe our health has gone through a crisis and no longer move about like we used to. It could be our relationships is in jeopardy and suffering some kind of dilemma and we no longer interact the way we formerly did. Maybe there's some plans that we want to have implemented. But yet, there's been opposition. There's been stopping. There's been interfering. There's been blocking us moving forward. But God says, I know my plans for you. Despite every mountain that stands in your way. It doesn't matter the amount of the army, that the enemy may bring against you. It doesn't matter the threats, the attacks. God says, I know my plans for you. And it takes faith to trust God's plans for your life. Amen. When everything you see, it looks like it's getting worse. Yeah. When it looks like you have lost all control. Everything is going against you. All your plans are going awry. But God says, I know my plans that I have for you. Now notice he says, I know. He didn't say, I'm telling you, or that you know. He said, but I know. There's some times that we have to trust God's plans for us, but we don't know his plans for us. When the strategy seems to be contrary to the things that we want, we say, Lord, I trust you. Here, see, faith believes God's plans are better than our plans. And that is the wonder of faith. When you have faith in God and you realize that your plans are not going to be realized. Right. That your actions and every effort that you make, it doesn't seem to be able to rescue your plans. You're not able to see your spouse saved like you want to see your spouse saved. You're not able to stay on that job when the boss is giving you a pink slip. You're not able to get up and move around freely when the doctor has already diagnosed you with something that is going to be crippling in your life. You're unable to resolve the conflict between you and your child. Do you have the faith to trust God? To believe that his plan is better than your plans? It's not always easy. It's not always the comfortable thing to accept that God knows better than I do. Faith rests in the plans of God when facing difficult problems. And that, you're saying at that point, okay, Lord, I'm trusting you. That's real faith. That's not imaginary faith. That's faith that says, Lord, I cannot figure this out. I don't know why it's happening. And Lord, it doesn't make sense to me. But faith, that's real faith that trusts in God, says, I know, God, that your plan is going to be the best plan for me despite the problems I'm experiencing right now. Despite it appears that my hopes and my dreams are slipping out of my hands, I know your plans for me are better. And that's a hard thing to swallow. And I know you're saying that. It's hard. It's difficult when you have in your mind already strategized and schemed and you already have in place in your mind and your thoughts how to work things out in the best way, in the best manner for things to come to a resolution, and you don't see it happening. To rest that everything is in God's control. That's faith. That's real faith. That's the faith that pleases God. And that's the faith that trusts the promises of God when it seems like they're not going to happen. Faith is firmly committed to God's plan when other options seem better. And here is a very important point that we need to address. That there will be options. There will be alternatives. There will be other strategies and schemes that you can implement to arrive at the choice or the destination or the resolution of situations that you want. It's possible. There's more than one way to get to your destination. But when you are firmly solidified and founded in faith in God, you take God's way.
Thank you.
And I mean, the other way may seem faster. The other way may seem more easy. The other way may seem better and quicker. The other way seem more logical. And sometimes God's way is the roughest way. God's way is the longest way. God's way is the most difficult way. But if it's God's way, there's a reason. Faith is firmly committed to God's plan when other options seem better. You better follow God's plan. You better follow God's way. Because there's something that God, when God looks at you saying no, when there is other ways to do something, he said, no, I can't take that way because it just is not comfortable for me. We got to believe in God's way. We got to hold on to God's way. The enemy trying to seduce us. As a matter of fact, there was a situation that Jesus was confronted with, where he was there in the wilderness and Satan was testing him. Satan said to him, listen, he took him to this pinnacle and he showed him all the kingdoms of the earth. He said, listen, I will give you all the kingdoms of the earth because it's mine to give you if you will bow down and worship me. I mean, could you imagine such an offer? Such an invitation to have access and to be in charge of every kingdom of the world? Because remember, Satan is the prince and the power of the air. Satan is the God of this world. Right. We better understand that. And so now he makes an invitation to Jesus. Listen, if you're going to join forces with me, if you move away from the plan that God has, he said, I will allow you to rule all the kingdoms of the earth. Jesus said, that sounds interesting, but no, I can't do that. Because God has a way that he wants me to follow. Then, once again, Jesus was there in the Garden of Gethsemane on the night that he was going to be arrested. On the night that he'll be betrayed by Judas. On the night that he'll be denied by Peter. On the last night he will spend with his disciples, the apostles that had been with him for 3.5 years. On that night, when he knows that this is the final night for him to be on earth, and he was facing now being turned over into the hands of the Romans. He goes to the garden and he prays. And he prays this prayer: Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. So this is to let us know that we may have the same dilemma, the same conflict that's going on within us. Where God's way, we may know God's way, but then we see there is an option, there's a way out, there's a way around it. There's a quicker, easier, more comfortable way of taking it, but we realize God's way requires a great sacrifice. Jesus experienced it. And he prayed 3 times. Lord, if it's possible, if there's another way, I don't want to take this route. I don't want to follow through with this plan. I don't want to experience what's coming ahead. But then after the 3rd time of praying, he acquiesced and said, nevertheless, not my will. Let your will be done. Can you say that? Can you say that when you are presented with the easy way out of your problem? Can you say, Lord, not my will, but your will, when there is a quick solution to the dilemma you're facing? If there is a way that would allow you to avoid the problems that you see by taking God's way, that'll be less painful. When you decide to say, Lord, I'm going to take your way, that's real faith. That's not imaginary faith. Amen. Our faith reveals our love for God in the midst of temptation. And here's why without faith it's impossible to please God. Because when we're tempted, it shows where our heart is, what we really love. In James chapter 1, verse 12, it says this. James 1, verse 12. Blessed is the man that endures temptation. For when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life, which the Lord has promised to them that love him. Your temptations and really your response to temptation will reveal your love for God. See, faith is willing to suffer in temptation because of love for the Lord. You suffer when you're tempted. You're willing to endure whatever the price is because the love is so great. When you love someone, you're willing to make sacrifices that are uncomfortable. You're willing to do things that you normally would not do, but because you love them so much, you're willing to surrender other things because you love them. You love them, you love them. And so that love, your love for God drives you to resist the seduction of the enemy. It causes you to say no to things that are so appealing, so desirable, things that you may have longed for and yearned for and desired. Things that you want to experience, and you say, no, I can't do that because I love God. I mean, just think, and temptation may not just be sexual. It could be where you're being tempted to lash out. You're tempted to get even. You're tempted to get revenge. You're trying your best. And understand, I understand this, y'all, because sometimes crazy. They're taking their time crossing the street. When I'm in a rush to get somewhere, there's a temptation. There's a temptation to help them across the street. Oh, but I love the Lord, y'all. I can't do that. I can't do that. I love the Lord. See, there's all kinds of temptations. There are temptations to give up. The enemy want to tempt you to surrender. You know something? Why are you waiting on the promises of God? Why do you believe God's going to step in on your behalf? Where you get the idea that God is going to be the one that you can depend on and rely on? Why in the world? You ought to give up. You ought to surrender. But because you love God, listen, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. You love God so much that you would not back down. You would not surrender. You would not give in. You would not throw in the towel. You will hold on to your love for God. Faith is willing to suffer in temptation because of love for the Lord. And I know some of you are going through some things right now that's making your life really uncomfortable. In some cases, unbearable. Things that you want to see change and you want to see it change quickly. Things that you think is unfair, that you should not have to endure or go through it. There are things that you are facing. Maybe it's on your job, the way they treat you. The fact that you may be unfairly treated. Or maybe it's the fact that you think that you've been trying to get a job. You've been sending your resume. You've been trying to go in and to solicit some kind of help to get work. And you have not, could have been out of job, out of work for months and years. And the devil is trying to beat you over the head, saying, why are you holding on to God? It doesn't seem to be worth it. But your faith is willing to suffer in temptation because of your love for the Lord. You're willing to endure people talking about you. Amen. You're willing to endure watching others experience, success and prosperity while you are languishing. Maybe living paycheck to paycheck. Maybe you're already homeless. Already you got problems. But you're still holding on to God. That's the faith that pleases God. As long as the sun is shining, you could celebrate God. But when the clouds gather, when the storm is brewing, when it seems like devastation is about to rain down upon you, can you still retain your faith in God? Faith resists temptation, receiving comfort through love for God. And that's the thing. That it's the love of God that comforts you when nobody else is there to comfort you. When you've been isolated, you've been abandoned, people have turned their back on you. They were your friends at one point, but now that you are in a pit, they no longer care about you, no longer concerned about you, but you know your God loves you. And it's your faith knowing that God loves you. When you may be in agony, in pain, and death is knocking at the door, real faith says, Lord, I love you. And if it's my time to go, I'm ready to be greeted by you and be received by you. That's the faith that pleases God. See, it's not the microwave faith, not the faith that vacillates based on the circumstance and the conditions that we're in, Not the faith that as long as everything is going well, I am going to rejoice in the Lord. No, it's the real faith that God has poured into our hearts that makes us love Him when we are going through the roughest time of our life. Tears may be flowing down your cheeks because you have a broken heart. But faith, you love God. You don't release that love of God. Here's what it says in Romans chapter 8, verse 35 through 37. It says, who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation, or distress, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or peril, or sword? As it is written, for thy sake we are killed all the day long. We are accounted as sheep for the slaughter. But nay, or no, in all these things we are more than conquerors through Him that loved us. So I will conquer when despair tries to get settled in. I will conquer when defeat seems imminent. I will conquer when distress tries to overtake me. I will conquer when trouble is rising over me. I will conquer because the glory of God and the love of God rises up to me when I'm at my weakest point. I will conquer though the world is against me. I'll conquer when people turn against me. I will conquer when I gotta walk alone because the love of God sustains me. Yeah. We have to have that kind of faith that the love of God will stand by us. The love of God will carry us. The love of God will incorporate us into His bosom. The love of God will allow us to stand firm in the midst of the most severe circumstances. Amen. That's faith. When you don't have a crutch to stand on. When everything and everyone have abandoned you, your bank account is empty. Creditors are banging on your door. Trouble at home, trouble at work, and everything seems to be going wrong in your life. You want to know what real faith is? Where all you got left is God's love for you. And that's all you can hold on to. People laughing, people mocking, people ridiculing you, but you know God loves you. You know, so it don't matter. It doesn't matter to me. Though, I should say it doesn't matter, but it's not as important to me what other people say about me. As long as I know my wife stands with me. As long as I know my children are there with me. And then as long as I know you are with me. It doesn't matter what the world says. Long as the love of God sustains me, that is what matters. And that has to be the thing that stimulates and undergirds our faith. Oh, man. I'm going to skip. I'm going to jump over some things. I want us to look at. I want to look at God's promises and how the faith is connected to it. I want to look at an individual. I want to look at an individual today. In Genesis, we're going to look at the story of Noah and how all this applies. This shouldn't be long. We're going to look at Genesis chapter 6. Verses 13 and 14. And here's how it reads. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make you an ark of gopher wood. Rooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shall pitch it within and without with pitch. God had got tired of the world. The wickedness, the evil, the ungodliness, the rebellion, the disobedience that was going on. God saw it rampant back in Noah's day. And he said, you know something? I'm sick and tired of them. I'm going to destroy this world. But the word says that Noah found grace in the eyes of God. And so Noah now gets opportunity that to receive a promise from God. God makes a promise to Noah. But this promise is predicated on something. That Noah got to have faith. And the promise that God makes to us, they're going to be predicated on our faith. And in verse 17 of Genesis chapter 6, it says this. And behold, I, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth, to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die. But with you will I establish my covenant, and you shall come into the ark, you and your sons and your wife and your sons' wives with you. Look at the promise that God and the provision that God is making for Noah and his wife and his children. God watches and looks out for his people, those that have faith. He sets us aside. He segregates us from the rest of the world, the rest of those who do not have faith. In verse 22 of Genesis chapter 6, it says, thus did Noah according to all that God commanded him, so he did. People of faith obey God. They recognize when God speaks to them that they need to take notice of it and they need to follow his instruction. And Noah was following God's instruction. Verse chapter 7, all of your house into the ark. For you have I seen righteous before me in this generation. So God identifies the righteousness of Noah at this time. Chapter 7, verse 5, it says, and Noah did according unto all that the Lord commanded him. His obedience. If you do not obey God, there can't be no faith if there's no obedience to God.
Amen. Yes, sir.
Cannot be any faith if there is a refusal to obey God. Genesis chapter 8, verse 15 to 17 says, and God spake unto Noah, saying, go forth of the ark, you and your wife and your sons wives with you. He said, get out the ark. Bring forth with you every living thing that is with you of all flesh, both of fowl and of cattle and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, that they may breed abundantly in the earth, and be fruitful and multiply upon the earth. This is a remarkable story about the flood. Remarkable about how God chose one man, and that man, being a man of faith, was able to survive the greatest disaster that the world have ever experienced. Even up until now, there's been nothing like the flood of Noah. But let's get a few things that is pointed out in this. First of all, God's promises test Noah's faith. His promises test Noah's faith. Understand, God said to Noah, build an ark. We have to look at this real closely, because first, to build an ark because it would rain. Not build an ark so that you could sail from one continent to another continent on the ocean. He said, no, build an ark because I'm going to send rain. First of all, he built the ark though it had never rained before. That's faith. For all of the centuries before Noah, from Adam unto Noah, it had never rained before. Never. No water ever came out of the sky From Adam to Noah, the water came up from the earth. It was a mist, the dew like we see in the morning.
Amen.
But yet Noah obeyed God because of the promise and because of his faith. He built the ark not near any great body of water. So he wasn't next to the Mediterranean Sea. He wasn't next to the Atlantic Ocean. He was not next to the Indian Ocean or anything. No, he was in a desert near a mountain when he built this ark. That's faith, y'all. And sometimes God asks you to do something, it seems crazy. And I imagine it must have seemed crazy to Noah, but he had such faith in God that he obeyed God. And it was critical that he did that. And it's critical for us to obey God when he makes promises to us. Obey God, because I'm going to tell you there's some things that are connected to the promises that your obedience is required.
Amen.
Next, God's promises perfects Noah's faith. First of all, God's promises test Noah's faith. Now God's promises perfects Noah's faith. Notice, he was building this ark for 120 years. So God said, build this ark. I'm going to make it rain. It took him 120 years to build that ark. 120 years. We don't even live 120 years anymore. Could you imagine for 120 years you expected it to rain? 120 years you heard God speak once that it's going to rain, and you continually build it. You put together the boards, and you put together the pitch, and you're making preparation for rain that for 120 years did not show. But not only that, it had not rained hundreds of years before that. Could you imagine the ridicule, the mocking, the laughing that he experienced because he believed the promise of God? And sometimes we go through that. You believe the promise of God, and you're willing to obey God, to do something, to act according to his guidance and his direction. You responded to his spirit and his leadership. See, he built the ark despite his emotions. See, when you have faith, that don't mean that your emotions all of a sudden get in line. Your emotions, they respond to what you is seeing. Your emotions, if you see something, your emotions respond to it. What you hear, your emotions respond to it. What you feel, your emotions respond to you. What somebody say to you or what the circumstances are, your emotions respond to it. But your emotions should not control you. He continually built the ark despite his emotions. We don't know. He got in bed every night. His wife never been asking, what in the world are you doing? Sitting around the dinner table. You going out there and working that ark again? We don't know all of the things. His family, his friends, his extended family, relatives, friends, his network of people that he knows in his community. All of them are watching him build this ark and talking about this rain, and they're saying, what in the world is rain?
Amen.
He built the ark regardless of ridicule. He built the ark without any physical indications of rain. There were no clouds in the sky. There was no swiftly blowing winds. There was no lightning. There was no thunder. But God had told him it's going to rain. So he was perfecting the faith of Noah. And understand, when God is perfecting your faith, it takes time. We want things to happen quickly. We want things that happen according to our way and according to our schedule. But when God is perfecting your faith, he takes time. And you're waiting, and he takes time. Things seem to be you're collapsing all around you, and you're waiting, but God is taking time. He's perfecting our faith so that our emotions don't cause us to make some grave error, so that we don't be allow ridicule and accusation and people mocking us to cause us to act and respond in a way that will corrupt and undermine our faith. He's perfecting our faith so that we'll stand on the word no longer is corrupted with your fears and your doubts and your disbelief. Faith that is no longer contaminated with your lusts and your yearnings and your cravings. Faith that don't have the doubt, that don't have the vacillation. No, it's stable, it's secure, it's comfortable, waiting on God. God promises grows Noah's faith. And this is an interesting one. Because God said, build this ark. And I'm saying, it's not a little boat. This is not a little a sailing craft. No. This is a super yacht, a cruise ship. It's the size of a cruise ship. And then he said, I want you to build compartments in it. What's the compartments? He said, because the animal's going to be there for 120 years. He's making sure that the compartments are the right size, and he got them all together. So he grows Noah's faith by when it's time for the animals to come. Noah did not have to go out and catch now whatever. He did not have to set any traps. He did not have to seduce any of them to come in. He did not have to woo them. What happened is, on the day that they were supposed to show up, the animals got in marching order, and they responded to the call of God. Could you imagine the mind of Noah when he saw what God had orchestrated? Not ahead of time. The animals didn't arrive there and was waiting for Noah to finish. No, after Noah completed the ark, all of a sudden the animals started coming. The birds started flying. The different animals started approaching, and they marched into the ark. And understand, the lion wasn't chasing the lamb. The alligator wasn't ready to eat, the hippopotamus. The animals, they were orderly. Because and Noah was seeing the glory of God and his power over all of the nature, of all nature and all the animals. His faith grew in God. He built the ark according to the size given by God. He built the ark expecting the animals to come. He built the ark and put food on it for his family and the animals. Noah had to put the food on there. But God brought the animals. And then finally, God's promises rewards Noah's faith. Protecting Noah, his family, and the animals from the rain. But see, the promise of God in Noah's obedience to that promise, it protected Noah. It was the ark that Noah built in realizing and accepting the promise of God that became his means of salvation. See, the ark saved Noah and his family and animals from the rain. The rain came. If Noah had not built that ark, just think about it. If Noah had not built, he would have been destroyed. The animals would have been destroyed. But because Noah took the promise of God, and Noah believed and had faith in the promise of God, Noah built the ark. And so therefore he was saved because he built the ark that God instructed him and said that this is the promise. The ark protected Noah, his family, and the animal from God's judgment. The ark was confirmation of God's covenant blessings with Noah. And let us get a little understanding about this ark. This ark, every one of us got an ark to build. Amen. Every one of us have an ark to build. God have called us to build an ark. I'm not talking about the one like Noah built, but when God have given you promises, God is giving you, and understand that the promises of God are designed to be a means in which you are motivated to build and to erect, to put the nail in the board, to lay the pitch on the thing, because you are protected the judgment of God. You're protecting yourself from you're protecting yourself from the threats that the world is going to experience. You are going to receive the reward. So the ark not only becomes your protection, it becomes your reward.
Amen.
When we pursue the promise of God, we are building an ark of safety. You cannot ignore God's promises. You cannot just discard God's promises and expect to escape the judgment that's going to come. You have to embrace the promises of God, because that's the only way you can build the ark. The story of Noah is the story of people of faith. Every person of faith is building their ark.
Amen.
And it's that ark that God's going to use to bless your life. It's that ark that God is going to use to save your life. It's that ark that God's going to use to allow you to escape the judgment that is to come.
Amen. Amen.
When we fail to honor the promises of God in our life, when we don't have any faith in the promises of God, we are saying like the people that was there in Noah's day. What is rain? There's no judgment coming from God. I don't have to fear anything, but realize that it's our responsibility to build the ark that God has promised our salvation through and our deliverance through. Let us bow our heads at this time.